Okay, so welcome everyone to this webinar meeting jointly organized by the Ateneo de Manila University and the Jamsetji Tata School of Disaster Studies, headed by Professor Jacquleen and Daria. I am Joy Rocamora, a research associate of the SICAR-PH project under the Office of the President and a graduate assistant for the Master in Disaster Risk and Resilience, or MDRR program of the Ateneo de Manila University. So just please be guided by the following house rules. All attendees are automatically muted upon entry and all cameras must be switched off unless needed to aid the bandwidth. This event will be recorded for documentation purposes, and for speakers, please use your microphones and videos only when necessary. And if you have any questions, let us all utilize the chat box at the bottom of your screen so we can take note of the questions and we can go back to them later. So this event is aimed at identifying potential areas of collaboration between the Jamsetji Tata School of Disaster Studies, Tata Institute of Social Science, and the Ateneo de Manila University. This will be a panel discussion where representatives from both universities can present their pedagogical approaches, action projects, or interventions to develop, implement, and mainstream programs that contribute positively to disaster risk reduction and capacity building, as well as resilience promotion in the wake of the climate crisis. We will also extend into an interactive meeting to identify potential areas and agendas for collaboration.
I'd like to ask Dr. Fabian Dairy. Can you please give your welcome? Toby, are you there?
Yes. Well, thank you, Emma.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to, I'm sorry, there were really too many meetings this afternoon. But I'm very happy to be able to meet and have this opportunity to discuss with the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Maybe just to make my presentation short, I'm with the Board of Trustees of the university. And because of this, we have a 10-year plan, which we've been discussing. Actually, it was launched last 2 years ago, but with the COVID-19 pandemic, we are rethinking it and redirecting it. One of the objectives that we're aiming for is the Laudato Si University. This is a Laudato Si was a encyclical which Pope Francis wrote, I think 3 years ago, and basically what this encourages, pushes us. It's really just 3 words. There are a lot of presentations, but maybe to summarize it in 3 words, and this would be the direction of the university, it's really people, environment, and technology. That basically sums up what Laudato Si is. So hopefully this partnership will head in that direction. There are quite a lot of details presented this afternoon, but maybe just remember those 3 words. What we are prioritizing are people, environment, and technology. So on that brief note and the welcome message, I look forward to this collaboration with Tata. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Toby.
So we have introductory messages from Professor Jacquleen and Daria, Dean of the Jamsetji Tata School of Disaster Studies, and Dr. Emma Porio, Professor of Sociology and Anthropology at the Ateneo de Manila University.
All right. Wonderful to see that this event is finally happening. I think we have been talking about it for some time, despite all our sort of pulls and pressures with regard to the academic rhythm, which often take precedence. And I think we are wedded to our schedules with regard to exams and teaching and announcements of results and so on. Of course, we all have different rhythms and different calendars. Just to give you a very quick, I want to recap. I think some of you have been part of the process right from the beginning, and maybe there are some of us who are probably new to the sort of, so I'm going to a little bit start off by stating that this whole partnership has evolved out of a meeting that took place between your Prime Minister and ours, and I think there was a conversation that happened between them about what areas we could collaborate, and what was identified was this area of disaster risk reduction, disaster response. Both the countries have a lot in common in terms of the kind of diversity we have, diversity of populations. Both countries are affected severely by different kinds. There are several challenges that are common to both the countries, and it was felt that both practical and strategic interests is something that we could converge on and look at how we could collaborate. So it was in this context that we were approached by the ambassador of the Indian ambassador, who's located in Philippines, and we were there were again series of conversations, and which has culminated in an MOU. And there is a general purpose MOU between the two universities. Both the universities are extremely well known in the respective countries for their high quality work, for their applied work, for the interdisciplinarity. So with that background, I thought, let me once again welcome everybody. And while we are calling this a webinar, it is actually a process where we hope to identify common interests, both research interests, maybe training interests, maybe we share what we are good at, and what probably is the context in which we would be identifying our joint projects or joint areas of work. So I think with that intent, this is really about getting to know each is. Of course, we also have faculty colleagues. Some of our colleagues are relatively new, maybe 1 or 2 years old to the School of Disaster Studies, and there are others who've been there for nearly a decade. So I think everybody's experience of having engaged in disasters varies, but I can assure you that each one of our colleagues are people who are deeply committed to the idea of disaster response, development, and climate change, and looking at how education and how the university can contribute. Very briefly, I want to also recount the fact that the Tata Institute of Social Sciences as a university has had a very long history of doing disaster response work that goes back to 1947, where faculty and students have worked in the field. And this is really the ethic of the institute, where we do response work to reach out to communities that are most marginalized. Our focus remains with working and looking at how we reach out to the most marginalized, because they're the ones who often get left out. And with that intent, there's a fair bit of work that we do, again, with policymakers. So our work in the realm of governance comes out of our engagement with the most marginalized. Who are going to be making a presentation will talk about this, and will also be illustrating the kind of work that we do, of course, very, very briefly. And finally, I really wish that we were having this conversation, this interaction in person rather than in a virtual mode. But yes, we are living in COVID times, so we have to contend with what is feasible. And I really look forward to getting to know your work and what each one of you is doing. Thank you very much. Over to you, Professor Emma.
Thank you very much, Professor Jacquleen and the TISS team. Thank you very much for pursuing this. We have been in communication since around May, or after the signing of the MOU with your institution. So I would like to say also to the ADMO and MO team to thank you very much. I really appreciate that, our deans and our faculties are here, because as I said earlier, we are very busy. So, but I would like to say that we hope that this meeting will start a new beginning of collaboration and perhaps we can identify the areas that we can work together. The Coastal Cities at Risk, which is under the Office of the President, is the flagship program for the Ateneo de Manila and Manila Observatory for Climate and Disaster Resilience. So after the signing, Father Bobby wrote to me if I can take care about it. Although we did have a meeting, Professor Junkie, and sometime, I think before the signing, wherein we met with Father Joey Cruz, who was the in charge of our international relations at the time, with Dean Banjo and other members of the team. So I would like to say thank you very much for everybody for coming here. I will talk later about, the Coastal Cities at Risk project, which the project holder used to be Father Jet Villarin and now Father Roberto Yap. The Ateneo de Manila represents really the higher education stream in the National Disaster Risk Management Council, which is really the national council in charge in that capacity, the Manila basically represents all higher education institutions. In a national, SICAR is just sort of coordinating, but really the work will be with both schools, the School of Sciences and Engineering and the School of Social Sciences, and also with the Manila Observatory. So thank you very much, Professor Junkie and the TIS team, and thank you very much to the Ateneo de Manila team. I'm very, appreciative of the fact that we are also busy with our exams and grading papers and the like, but you make time here. So thank you and welcome Professor Junkie and team to the Ateneo de Manila University. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Porio and
Enjoy.
Dr. Andaria. Yes. So let us begin these sessions with the presentations from the Jamsetji School of Disaster Science with Field Action Research, Mobility, Capacity Building, and Networking projects.
Yeah, thank you, Joy. That would be, I'm Jacqueline here. Can I start?
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
Yes, you may.
So, yeah, myself and my colleagues would kind of pitch in to bring forth this component of our work, which is the field action projects, the research, mobility, and capacity building projects and networking projects that we kind of anchor. Some of the recent projects, not all of them. The next slide, please. So as Janki had kind of mentioned, one of the very unique aspect of Tata Institute of Social Sciences and the school that was established within the institute in 2006. The institute was established in 1936. Since then, we have been constantly involved in disaster. It's not a recent phenomenon. And it's the consolidation of the work of the institute in the context of disasters that kind of becomes the building block for the Jamsetji Tata School of Disaster Studies. The next slide, please. So when the center was established, the map kind of captures the various interventions that we have, the disaster response work that the school has been involved in, and in various locations within the Indian context and even in the neighboring countries. But the more details about the recent the pandemic-related work, which is an institute-wide work that could be kind of found in the link that is kind of provided. Some of these relief or immediate response work kind of continue into long-term field action projects, which go kind of beyond 2 years of intervention on ground. And these are largely focused on areas where there is a intervention gap, or it could be a policy gap. So we kind of pick up areas. So in our immediate relief and response work, we identify areas that need to be worked upon. And then we kind of go ahead and work like any other organization to be able to demonstrate an innovative intervention, which is actually missing on ground or in the sector. And being an academic institution, we kind of club our research, our policy action work along with the field action projects. So the research that emanate from there, the new theoretical models that emanate from this groundwork that we do, adds on the theoretical reflections that kind of emerge, kind of feed back into our course, also into policy action and for shaping the praxis in the context where we kind of work. So I'm going to take you through some of the significant field action projects that have emerged from the various disaster response and work that the school has done since 2006. Next slide, please. The next slide. So I would request Professor Jacquleen to kind of speak. This is one of the first field action projects. Field action projects is not a new phenomenon to the institute, but this is one of the first field action projects within the school, headed by Professor Andaria, and I would ask her to speak a few words.
Well, yes, this was the post-tsunami context, and we have islands, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. On the map, you will see there are a string of islands that traverse a very large sort of area, and we have tribal communities that live in these islands, and they are protected from outsiders, and you cannot really access these communities very easily. And these were the islands that were closest to Banda Aceh, so the epicenter of the undersea quake. And this was a group that really was struggling with accessing relief, rehabilitation. The connectivity was gone because the jetties were destroyed, and the airstrip that existed was also destroyed. So we worked there for several years and worked with the tribal communities, engaging in citizenship training, making them aware of what government schemes and programs were coming in. So there were several things we did. We worked with the youth, we worked on trainings, helped develop networks amongst themselves, and yeah, so I think there's a series of activities that were conducted basically to help ensure that the rebuilding that was taking place, the aid that came in, was sensitive to local needs and local sort of requirements. I'll stop there and hand over, because I think there's a lot to talk about, but I'll kind of, this is really the gist of what we did. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah. The next slide, please. The next project in 2008, the field action project that we kind of initiated, was called the AAPTI, the an avenue for psychosocial and therapeutic intervention. This was initiated in the context of the 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks in Mumbai. So we kind of, as any other disaster, we kind of started off with the immediate response work and further consolidated. So since 2008 till now, we've been kind of working with this particular group. For 5 years, we kind of worked in providing direct services, a comprehensive, demonstrating a model to kind of reach out to terror survivors who are victims of centrifugal disasters. There were no models available in the country. There was the interventions or the support mechanisms were literally absent. And it is in that context that we kind of started working with the AAPTI project. Further, we demonstrated different versions of this model because each intervention is kind of contextualized. In various other similar centrifugal disasters, like the 13/7 blast in Mumbai itself, there's a very bizarre blast in 2011, the Amli fire or the hospital fire, the AMRI hospital fire in West Bengal, Kolkata. So we demonstrated how comprehensive interventions need to be kind of anchored and delivered in different contexts. We'd even taken this model further to work on issues of disability and disaster risk reduction in one of the neighboring districts. The next slide, please. The Vivendi Project, it's the Vivendi chapter of AAPTI. And now, since after the initial phase of work, the work has been primarily to kind of come up with knowledge products, influence policy makers through by documenting the voices of the most marginalized, by tracking them over 10 years. Now it's going to be the 13th year. Tracking the voices of some of these most marginalized survivors and bringing it to the notice of policymakers to kind of make a difference in the policy context. So that's the nature of work. Even this year, we had a virtual exhibition that we kind of brought out, which not only captures the lived experiences of the survivors and their trajectories of recovery, but the memories and hope and the felt experiences, which was documented through creative videos and artwork. The next slide, please. The other, in 2015, in response to the Nepal earthquake, similarly, we started off as a relief work, consolidated as long-term field action project called the Nepal Earthquake Recovery Support Program, where in different phases, the first phase was immediate response and relief, followed by work on psychosocial support, psychosocial first aid and psychosocial support interventions, where again, we kind of try to demonstrate a unique model that kind of suits the contextual realities of Nepal and that of a country in the global south. And then the second phase kind of had a livelihood recovery focus, where a livelihood fellowship program and an intervention program was rolled out, along with the housing, the construction of temporary shelters. It might sound like any other non-governmental organization doing it, but in each of these interventions that we do, we try to kind of bring up or demonstrate innovative methodologies, innovative interventions, or new theoretical frameworks that we kind of emerge by our immersion in ground, by our immersion in the ground realities of intervening. So that's the difference that an academic institution does when we kind of engage like any other actor in a disaster response context. Yet another project, which is the Disaster and Beyond project, which has been functional since 2017. This was kind of conceptualized in response to the recurrent droughts in the Marathwada context in Maharashtra itself, to demonstrate comprehensive set of interventions to enhance well-being by converging multiple layers of interventions, starting with local governance and leadership, groundwater management, agricultural practices, livelihood practices, which then kind of comprehensively address psychosocial well-being and adding on interventions to it. The difference out here, these are again kind of look like very common interventions which are done by different organizations. The difference out here was to kind of ground the whole exercise in values of social and environmental justice. So a project which was supposed to be done in 2 years kind of took us 5 years, so it's still going on, where we're trying to kind of where we're trying to say what is the hurdle for reaching the most marginalized, the most vulnerable within a kind of given context, which is basically the social structural inequalities and the structures that exist. And what processes do you kind of put in place? And using that kind of analyzing the 50 years of drought mitigation work that the state has kind of encountered and kind of proposing way forward with regard to. So that's another ongoing field action project. The next slide, please. Malin recovery is again a landslide in Maharashtra, where the institute kind of engaged in the immediate response, but there were several layers of work that were kind of required. We're still in kind of touch. These sites kind of become these sites. We do respond to most disasters, and in some of these sites we continue to kind of work. Not all spaces are kind of feasible. And these kind of sites become our spaces for long-term follow-up and understanding how social and disaster-related phenomenon kind of uncover. More with regard to our focus, as Janki had said, our focus has been on reaching the most vulnerable, the most marginalized. So kind of looking at what has been their trajectory practices, what has been facilitating them, and what interventions, and trying, and wherever possible, trying to implement those interventions and document them for further dissemination purposes to make a difference. I would request Soumya to kind of talk about the IFRC project, which is a global capacity building project.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We have a certificate collaboration with IFRC Geneva. This is something which started in 2012. And with the support of the IFRC team, Professor Andharia was the anchor at that point of time, where in collaboration with them, we developed a course structure for a certificate program. And we've been offering that program since 2012, and I think right now we are at cohort 18, and we have around 90 participants from 90 countries, around 300 participants. Most of them are working professionals, and they've been awarded certificates in disaster management. And the entire focus of this program is to work towards capacity building of Red Cross and Red Crescent professionals. So we get participants from the IFRC, the ICRC, as well as members from the national societies. So that way we have a range of collaborative network across the globe. In the past, I think 3 to 4 years, we have a large percentage of participants coming in from the African countries and very involved and engaged with the program. So that has been one very important initiative at our end for capacity building. And we are hoping to work with the IFRC with respect to the changes which the IFRC has gone through with respect to the 2030 strategy. So I think we'll be building up our curriculum content on that as well. So that's all from me, Professor Joseph.
Thank you, Soumya. The next slide, please. So a snapshot of all the recent research, mobility, capacity building, and networking projects. I'll quickly kind of run through them for you to get a feel of the nature of work that happens in our school. I've included in the next slide, please. I've included only the recent projects. So and many of this work kind of emerged from our field action projects, because they're also the site not just for demonstrating innovations, but also for innovative research approaches and theoretical frames. So the 26 level Memories, Hope and Way Forward was a virtual exhibition that we kind of recently inaugurated. The emphasis is to kind of take it to policymakers and to kind of get the voices of the most marginalized, their lived experiences and felt experiences to influence policy processes. India Disaster Resilience Leadership, it's in the third phase now. This is a project that we've been working since 2017. Where we had engaged with a very detailed research of capturing a very, very critical kind of a concept, which is resilience. And in the Indian context, we kind of engaged with, I would say, two other similarly critiqued concept of leadership, resilience, and disaster. So we've done a detailed case study using a case study approach, which captured 29 case studies across. It was in partnership with another organization called IHS in Mumbai. So 29 case studies across India covering the various geographical and topographical features, the hazard features. These 29 case studies was on social and technical systems, with that were kind of responding interventions in social and technical systems towards disaster risk reduction and resilience building. And from this, we were trying to kind of get a contextual understanding for the nature of disaster resilience leadership that is kind of required in the global south or in the Indian context in specific. The work continues. The manuscript is almost ready. There are around 11 case studies that are kind of used for our teaching purposes that kind of emerge from such projects. Understanding collective stress, the household vulnerability, these are also innovative methodologies that are kind of demonstrated, new theoretical frames that are kind of put forth and captured through the field action projects. And the mobility programs, like the Study in India program that we kind of did last February, there is a second round of on-site program in coming March, but due to the uncertainties, we're not very sure whether we go ahead. The next slide, please. During COVID, it kind of demonstrated a comprehensive model by a grounded study of the emergency operation centers, and kind of emergency operation centers were identified as grievance redressal cells. But for them to kind of become real grievance redressal cells, what more infrastructure, what more training capacity, and what kind of systems need to be put in place? There was a very detailed study and a framework. This was done in response to the request of the district administration to help them with the coordination of various interventions that kind of rolled out, that got rolled out in the COVID context. Another area of work was the transboundary water governance. This is the second year we worked in the transboundary rivers between Nepal and India. We finished one basin, now we're moving on to the second basin, which is the Mahakali Basin, looking at civic engagement as the key focus. Disasters is a is a key dimension that kind of is attached to these transboundary rivers, and it's the angle with which that we're kind of approaching it. LML is a new project. It's a networking research project with Cambridge University that we're kind of rolling out. It's in the month of January next week, trying to kind of engage with epidemic prediction and risk reduction from a comprehensive social science and technical kind of a bridging. The next slide, please. And some of the other projects in research projects that we just initiated are the disaster risk creation in urban resettlement processes in collaboration with University of Copenhagen and Rockshall. It's the Independent Research Fund Denmark funded project. The multi-hazard resilience of higher educational institutions in Asia Pacific, where we work with universities in Thailand and Australia with the HUC, that is the Himalayan University Consortium funding, ISIMOD and HUC funding. The UKD mobility program, which I spoke about, and the last one is infusing gender consciousness, intersectionality, and social inclusion perspectives in disaster pedagogies. This again is a consortium work which kind of looks at grounding social and gender inclusion and intersectional perspectives within the DRR curriculum, not just of our institutions, but of other universities across India. So that's all from me on this. My colleague Mahesh would share his experiences with the recent disasters, just for you to have a feel as to how from a disaster response we kind of move on to some of these field action projects and the research that kind of emerge. Thank you.
Yeah, this is the very recent intervention that we are doing in the Konkan region of Maharashtra, which was flood and landslide affected area. So we have just started working in this region. If you look at the coastal belt of India, the western coast, you will see Mumbai Goa highway. On this, there are these two towns of Mahad and Chipadun, which were flooded in end of monsoon in the month of July. The region is located below the Sahyadri range of mountains, and it gets all the rain from Sahyadri range to these areas. The Sahyadri range also is a big hydro project. It is also a major tourist place. So all the rainwater from Sahyadri range comes down to Mahad and Chipadun, and this area was heavily flooded in July. So we worked in this area on understanding what has happened. Here are some of the photographs of how the area was flooded. The flood has recently receded, and we are still working to see how one can engage in this area. You can see the extent of flood. The entire houses were underwater. You can see the flood water was almost like 15 feet. What you see here are the buses of the state transport, which are around 20 feet high, and that was the range of flood. The flood was at least 20 feet. The entire city was almost 20 feet deep in water. That was the extent of flood, and this is how it happened. So it was one of the reasons definitely climate change was. Observation also shows that climate change is not only reason why the area gets flooded, but the environmentally insensitive development planning is one of the major reasons why the area gets flooded. There are also various social vulnerabilities which add to the disaster of flood, and therefore when we are talking about climate change and disaster risks, one also need to consider the development planning and social vulnerabilities in that area, and that was one of the biggest learning from intervention in these areas. One major factor that has led to floods is there is a lot of tourism in Mahabaleshwar. So Mahabaleshwar was a forest once upon a time, but now it has become a tourist destination. So a lot of new public amenities are created, a lot of new roads are constructed, new resorts are coming up, new bungalows are coming up. This area also connects the western Maharashtra to coastal Maharashtra. So it's a state highway. So one can see very heavy traffic in that area. One cannot see this as a forest area. And because of lot of deforestation, there has been one can see that there are no forests at all. Once upon a time, it was a forest area, but with lot of deforestation, then one can see that there are no forests. But This also is leading to a lot of soil degradation. All the soil from Sahyadri flows down to the Konkan region, reducing the carrying capacity of the rivers which flow in Konkan region. This is another photograph
Mahesh,
of
you
the
will
soil.
need to wrap up quickly because there's only 5 minutes, and I think we have one more presentation by Ravinder.
Okay. Yeah, these are some of the photographs of deforestation. And with this of deforestation, one can see a lot of soil erosion, and all the rivers in Konkan belt are full of the sand that is coming from Sahyadri. One can see how the river is full of sand, and the carrying capacity of river is affected because of this. What you see in between as the island is all the sand that is saturated in the river, and because of this, the river cannot carry water, leading to floods. So, though heavy rains due to climate change is one of the reasons, deforestation and related soil degradation also leads to floods. One can see a lot of debris in the old rivers which has reduced the carrying capacity, and because of this the entire land stability is disturbed, leading to landslides. This is photograph of a landslide in Tadiye where 60 people were killed in this year. There is a lot of road constructions which is going on, and the roads many places worked as the dam, disturbing the entire water flow. This all these are big roads which was earlier only 2 lane, now has become 6 lane roads. One can see how the road has worked as the dam, water on the both side, because the road is on elevated ground so that the traffic doesn't stop. But this is another reason why floods in this area have increased. One can see how the road works as the dam. So yeah, I can actually stop here. This basically talks about some of the basically how the Sahyadri was degraded, leading to floods and landslides in the areas.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Campbell. Next up, we can listen to Dr. Ravinder Dhiman and Dr. Ramesh Veerappan on localizing integrated geospatial solutions for disaster and climate resilience through science, policy, and society. Would you be sharing your slides?
It's okay. I think I can speak directly
Okay.
without sharing the slides. I'll just take 2 to 3 minutes. So slides means I am the newest and youngest member of the JTSGS team, and I'll be talking mostly about the ideas what we are currently planning and working on. So already
So Professor Emma, he has decided he doesn't want to do slides. He's just going to speak.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you. The senior professors already have explained about the legacy of the work JTSDS is doing. In my research philosophy and interest about the Center for Geoinformatics, obviously we are assisting on field action projects wherever the geospatial component is included. Other than that, considering the localization of science policy for climate and disaster adaptation, in that case, I believe first thing is the inclusion of the society, and society should believe that there is a climate change. The scientific community is almost on an agreement that the climate change is there, but how to convince the society and how to enable the society to think that climate change is there. So therefore, I think the localization of indicator is very much important, because the modeling and prediction and projections, that is useful for scientific community, but when it comes to the society, to make them believe, it is very much important to identify local indicators and so on. So in that case, we are trying to address some of the research questions, like what are the ways to involve the society and how we can do that. So for that, one is identification of the local indicators, and already we have explained that with different field action projects and the geographical diversity along the Indian coastline, we try to capture various local indicators from the society also and from the physical indicator also. And then how we can incorporate in climate sensitive planning and to address different research questions. So Next is, I believe that inventorization of local indicator is very much important, and then only we can address the relevant policy issues. Now, we are also looking at some of the key questions, like the sea level rise is one of the indicator of climate change. But when we talk about the regional sea level rise along the Indian coastline, there are prediction projections like the cities are going to sink, but how much and when, at what location, still these questions are unanswered, and how we can use the science to answer these kind of questions related to regional sea level rise, and considering the global, the Indian summer monsoon and the Himalayan ecosystem itself makes the entire Indian Ocean rim a unique location where the research questions are varying from scale to scale and location to location. So in that case, also we are trying to talk about what are the debates around vulnerability methods, and what kind of vulnerability methods make more sense while considering the climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. Is the index-based approach is a solution, or if it is not a solution, how we can improvise the solution to incorporate in the policy decisions. Then next question, we are also looking towards the predictive modeling versus the probabilistic modeling. So there is a debate in scientific community, but when we talk about the localizing, what kind of modeling approaches are more realistic in considering climate change scenario and disaster risk reduction. So other than that, we are dealing with some of the field action projects and services to other agencies and institutes. So that's all currently. Some of these questions we are trying to address, and we can look forward to further integration and the common areas of research. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dhiman. So now we move on.
Okay.
This is Ramesh this side. So here I would like to add thanks Dr. Ravinder giving overall idea about the integrated geospatial solutions and all, so policy and other aspects. So and from my side I would like to add disaster mapping, risk mapping particularly as a instrument for disaster risk reduction. So here at TIS and JTSDS, we are particularly from Center for Geoinformatics, we are working in detailed mapping of disaster risk from various part of the country, and we are identifying hazard, vulnerability and risk as these are the key consideration for creating safer human settlements through a process of disaster risk reduction. So in this particular process, creating safer human settlements, understanding the vulnerability, hazard, and capacities of these related settlements are very, very important aspects. So spatial distribution of these hazard locations are essential tool or instruments for disaster risk mapping and management planning. So here we have been working to create these risk maps for various part of these countries. Hello. Yeah, the process of risk map preparation, it includes various variables and parameters and models and data sets, and finally we are incorporating the risk elements along with the hazard to identify which are the safer zones, and then where the developmental activities can be done by considering the disaster context, and then other way geospatial technologies as it is emerging as one of the most promising environments for development of disaster risk maps. These tools, geospatial tools and technologies will provide us number of data sets to generate these risk maps, and it integrate the valuable near real-time field information, and also it provides the comprehensive idea about a particular disaster affected area. And also apart from the geospatial technologies, location-based services is also an important tool. In real-time manner, we can't get all the data sets in hand. So we have from TIS as and JTS-DS, we have conducted a detailed work at Alappuzha district of Kerala, where we have generated a huge database of culverts, bridges, and public distribution systems by using a Google Map, and then location-based services and mobile apps, and then GPS devices. So the database we have generated for that particular region, as this is a highly flood-prone region, the database is highly useful for them for the particular aspect of disaster risk reduction. So they are placing the people at safer locations, and then providing the supplies, and then material during the disaster situations. They are supplying the stuffs and materials to the people very potential way. So that intervention we have done to that particular location was using this particular geospatial technologies was excellent, and now it is completely used for that particular district. And then second the other work we have done is drought assessment, and using remote sensing and GIS and other indicators. So here we are conducting agricultural drought assessments and hydrological drought assessments, meteorological drought assessment by using vegetation conditions, analyzing temperature conditions, crop field anomalies, groundwater drought index, and using number of satellite data sets. The most important part is we are estimating all these indexes from using satellite data sets, and then processing through digital image processing techniques and all. So this is all about. Apart from this, we are conducting hazard zonation mapping, particularly of landslides and floods, and then vulnerability mapping of cyclones. So many kind of work we are doing with the help of integrated geospatial solutions. And yes, this is all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Veerappan. Now we move on to the Ateneo contingent. So we start off with an introduction to the Ateneo Research Institute of Science and Engineering, ARISE, by Dr. Emeline Espiritu. And I think Dr. Espiritu will be sharing her.
And Dr. Espiritu's presentation will be followed by Dr. Toprio, Dr. Kamalisa, Dr. Guzman, Dr. Kotanko, and then Dr. Libatiki.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much for the invitation to share about or to introduce our new research institute, the Ateneo Research Institute of Science and Engineering. So as you know, this is an introduction to our mission and vision. We are a Filipino Jesuit university, and part of our mission is to not only to teach, but to do research and service to the community. And we are part of the 5 schools of the Loyola Schools, the School of Science and Engineering, which is composed of 8 departments from biology, chemistry, and so on and so forth. The most recent of which is the Ateneo Research Institute of Science and Engineering, which is the latest addition. It was established in January of 2020. And it serves as the focal point of research for programs in the School of Science and Engineering. Our mission is basically to be a center for world-class and socially innovative research initiatives in order to enhance the research capacity and networking capability of SOSE to help transform Philippine society. So this is one of the more important slides that I'd like to show you. The priority agenda of the university are shown here in blue, and superimposed are those that are aligned with the School of Science and Engineering. So from integral ecology to education reform, health, we have in the School of Science and Engineering research areas in environment, climate and disaster management, STEM education, health, and we have emerging technologies that sort of ties this all up together. So just a few information that I'd like to share also. As far as our organization is concerned, we have about 44 research teams in the school with ongoing internally and externally funded research, including new laboratories that we have just developed. These are some pictures of our laboratories, theater, media labs, as well as our facilities, the library. We have a recently established COVID testing facility called the Ateneo Blue Swab and Amplify, which is a drive-through facility that caters not just to the school, but also to the general public. And the more recent is the establishment of our Climate and Disaster Resilience Laboratory, or CDR, which was funded by with the support from IDRC of Canada and Coastal Cities at Risk Philippines. And this serves as the hub for all CDR-related research collaborations in SOSE. And these are the researches that have been and are still currently ongoing. I will not go through them, but just a few on atmospherics, on computer-aided instructions on disasters, modeling on climate, flood warnings, storm surges, air quality, and so on and so forth. And so far, since 2016, we have been able to produce Scopus index journals with our collaborators from various parts of the world, always in the hope of addressing and be compliant with our commitment to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So that brings my presentation to a close. I hope that you've been able to capture some of this. Thank you very much.
Len. That was great.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm LV Delara Tupio from the Mathematics Department of Ateneo. Next slide, please. So my team's research focuses, next slide, please. My team's research focuses on managing concurrent crises brought about by the COVID-19 and flood hazard in Marikina City. We chose Marikina as a pilot area, but if successful, we can replicate our studies in other disaster-prone areas. Marikina is known as one of the most flood-prone areas in Metro Manila. At the same time, it is one of the cities in Metro Manila with high number of cases, especially during the Now, another component of our research is flood modeling. We developed models for real-time and long-term forecasting of water level at Santo Niño Station of Marikina River. For this, we used close to 1 million data of hourly measurements of rainfall and water level from 2002 to 2020 from different stations managed by the MMDA FCOS. We used machine learning algorithms to forecast water level 3 hours ahead and 6 hours ahead. And then to supplement this, we adopt a previously developed model for long-term forecasting. Here we use probabilistic approach to determine annual frequency and duration of water level reaching above critical thresholds. Next slide, please. So we would like to know how high the flood water will be in residential areas, and therefore how many families will need to evacuate when the water level at Santo Niño Station reaches a certain height as forecasted. This is not as easy as I thought because there are several factors that need to be considered, such as the type of infrastructure present, the absorption capacity of soil, land use, and so on. So with the help of our GIS experts, we will use OpenLISM to carry out the simulations. And finally, when families evacuate during flood events, there's a threat that COVID-19 will spread. So we are helping the Marikina LGU develop its dashboard for disease monitoring and surveillance through data analytics, dynamic maps, and forecasting tools. Over. Thank you.
Can we now have Dr. Kamble?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I'm OB Kamble from the Physics Department, speaking on behalf of Dr. James Pass and Miss Shane Bisaga. So as Doc Emma Porio would say, air pollution is a hidden disaster, and the first step to understand the risk is to characterize the hazard. So one of the current projects of SOSI Arise, called the Campex Impact PH, is part of a bigger NASA campaign in the Philippines called Campex. It was an airborne campaign which aimed to study the roles of aerosol in weather and climate in the Philippines during the summer monsoon season. So next slide, please. Okay. Campex Impact PH as the ground-based observation field campaign is funded by the Ateneo SOSI Arise, is the first intensive ground-based meteorology and aerosol characterization in the Philippines. So some of the state-of-the-art in situ and remote sensing instruments in Manila Observatory grounds inside Ateneo are shown here. I will not go over them anymore since the slides are going to be shared anyway. So next slide, please. Okay, one of the many unique findings and output from this project is the first in-depth characterization of the vertical extent of Metro Manila pollution and its changes and variations throughout the day using the high spectral resolution LiDAR measurements deployed in Manila Observatory. The vertical extent of the Metro Manila pollution can be measured through detection of the planetary boundary layer height. This is a meteorological variable that quantifies up to what height most of the fresh surface emissions are being thoroughly mixed and distributed. Over here, the upper left photo shows an example of typical mornings in Metro Manila. This was taken on September 26, 2019 at 6:36 a.m., wherein you can visibly see the stronger pollution, the smog near the surface. Okay, the figure below shows the corresponding LiDAR measurements of the vertical extent of the aerosols. We can see from here that the visibly stronger pollution near the surface in the morning, given by the red color in the figure, and how it grew up to 1,000 meters after 8 in the morning local time. So the black box in the figure, okay, corresponds to the black box should extend all the way to the bottom here, should extend over here. So it corresponds to the photo in the upper left-hand corner. So the LiDAR measurements clearly show how the air pollution is confined near the surface during early mornings. The last plot to the upper right shows the measured PBLH, which is the red curve, for selected days in 2019, and the collocated PM2.5, which is the aerosol or the pollution measurements, as the urinal box plots. So you could see that the highest surface concentration of PM2.5 are observed in the morning from 7 to 9 a.m. local time, just like in the September 26, 2019 morning photo. And this is attributed not only to the surface emissions, but also to the low PBLH as shown in the red curve. So as soon as the PBL doubles in volume or height, we observe a drop in the surface concentration starting at 10 a.m. local time onwards, and that drop is maintained as the PBL continues to grow until 12 noon. So indicating the contribution of the boundary layer height to the dilution of surface concentrations. Now, this type of study is very important so that we can also determine at what times during the day we are at most risk to exposure to air pollution, paying particular attention to sensitive groups such as children, the elderly, and those with existing pulmonary and cardiovascular diseases. That's it from the physics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Obi. Now we go on to the environmental science program, our department. We have Dr. Eileen Guzman for the Master in Disaster Risk Resilience, followed by Dr. Kendra Gutangco Gonzalez on Urban Resilience Model. Doc I, yeah.
Thank you very much, Doc Emma. So good afternoon, everyone.
So 1 minute lang ha.
I'm Eileen Guzman from the Department of Environmental Science, and I'm going to talk today about the Master in Disaster Risk and Resilience, which is designed to advance interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary approaches to addressing risks and building resilience. Our program integrates theory, methods, and skills in both the physical and social sciences into a problem-focused and solutions-driven program that employs the systems thinking lens of analysis. This program aims to produce leaders, managers, and professionals who can build capacities in disaster risk and resilience in their respective sectors and be able to work in collaborative decision-making platforms. Our MDRR program is jointly designed and delivered by the Ateneo de Manila University's Department of Environmental Science, School of Science and Engineering, the Department of Sociology and Anthropology under the School of Social Sciences, the Manila Observatory, and the Ateneo Innovation Center. Next slide, please. So since the program started in 2018, we've had a total of 16 capstone projects. So next slide. So these are some examples of capstone projects that have been presented. And this include anything from evaluation of monitoring systems, etc., to using social media as part of the disaster risk and resilience. So one example here is of a capstone project that was done by Mr. Perez. So the objective of which was to set indicators for the OCD, that's our Office of Civil Defense, to measure and monitor local level disaster risk in the Philippines. The methods included content analysis, key informant interviews, surveys, and focus group discussions, as well as triangulation. The intent of this capstone is for it to be applied to other LGUs nationwide and for OCD to regularly review the indicators as well as that of the stakeholders and adapt and institutionalize these indicators. Last slide, please. So the MDRR is currently ranked 39 in the Eduniversal Best Masters Ranking 2021 in the area of environmental security. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doc I. Can we now go on to Dr. Gotanco Gonzalez? Ken, please.
Yes, good afternoon. Sorry. So I am Kendra Gotanco Gonzalez from the Department of Environmental Science. And this is the next slide, please. This is the work that we've done as part of the Ateneo Human Environment Dynamics Research Group in SOSE, but with support from the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability as well under the CICAR-PH project. So in the interest of time, yes, so just click through all the bullet points. So we are analyzing the concept of resilience, and you can just click one more time. And what you can see on the slide is one of our proposed frameworks for that, which is understanding resilience in terms of a sustainability framing. For example, if a city or community is able to optimally provide services to its community, then they are in a better position to resist shocks and to cope with chronic stress. And that is a dimension of resilience. So it's a matter of looking at how the provision of these services evolve over time with population growth and with more frequent and or severe hazards. So next slide. We approach this problem using systems thinking and system dynamics modeling. Using a freely available platform, we develop what we call the Integrated Urban Services Resilience Index model, which calculates a resilience score for a city based on two major components: the Urban Ecosystem Resilience Index, which tracks urban ecosystem services, such as provisioning services for food, energy, water, regulating services, for example, for climate and air quality and floods, cultural services, and supporting services. The other main component is the Socio-Economic Resilience Index, which includes the provision of health, education, and protective services, housing services, and poverty and employment concerns. And we tested this model with case studies from Pasig, and if you just click one more time, from Valenzuela. We took what these cities have in mind in terms of development plans, and plotted how they would change, how their resilience score would change with these initiatives according to this model. So unfortunately, we don't have time to go into it in more detail, but we're happy to share the details later on if you're interested in how we compute for this index. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kendra Gotanco Gonzalez. Now we'll proceed with the Ateneo Innovation Center, which is also one of our partners really, and the MDRR and CICAR-PH.
Okay. Oops. So the Ateneo Innovation Center was established more than 10 years ago. and Greg Tangonan is here, Toby Dairy, the co-founders from that time. I'll talk about three technologies that we've been bringing into communities and into our partners. The philosophy is we take the best technologies that we have at SOSE and engage with the communities. We develop reference designs, and when we engage with communities, we also see what contributions they can have on the facets of the technology. Essentially, we want to co-create and co-develop with them. So the three reference designs that have been really gaining traction in communities. I start off with the clean water system. We have various manifestations of this technology. We started off designing a clean water systems that take humidity from the air and provide a system that can be maintained using automobile parts, local automobile parts. We've continued that philosophy using locally available technologies such as powered from tricycle engines. This is a very common mode of transportation in our local communities. Also manually powered filtering systems. We've been partnering with the LGUs, local government units all over the country, in deploying these systems. And next slide, please. There you go. So we have almost 200 solar-powered clean water systems already, funded by Ateneo, funded by the LGUs themselves, because of the need. The design that we have found that has been gaining a lot of traction was a very portable information node with a pre-positioned information that we initially developed for post-disaster recovery and post-disaster communications. And recently are now being deployed during this COVID remote learning school year in multiple schools all over the Calabar zone and Metro Manila area. And this is just a small small form factor computer that initially started off like an AC adapter plug design that developed by our industry partner Ionics, and now we've carried it further. And the content there is on a terabyte drive. We're able to deploy most of a K-12 curriculum on it, and with like a digital library, it contains open educational resource. Recently, we partnered with the.
If you can just highlight, and then we so that because we're running out of time.
I'm 2/3 of the way. So so we have a partnership with DepEd and with the math department funded by DOST. They have developed content that is approved by the Department of Education. So we're deploying this in multiple schools all over Luzon. And the third thing is we have resilient communications systems that are based on vehicle-to-vehicle communication standards, the Asian standard, and also the unmanned aerial systems. So post-disaster, we can provide emergency communications when 5G, 4G, and LTE is down. And finally, I don't have time, but in just 10 seconds, we also have drone imaging, aerial imaging capabilities that we were able to deploy actually in 2013 Haiyan typhoon disaster. That's it.
Thank you very much, Nat. I'm sorry, but really, we're running out of time. So I will now call on Dr. Alfred Paulik, and who will do for the School of Social Sciences. Alfred? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emma. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alfred Paulik from the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. I'm also the director of the anthropological and sociological initiatives of the Ateneo. Since Dr. Randy Tuano from the Department of Economy has had to leave to attend another meeting, I will also present the slides from the whole school. Yes, okay, so yeah, let's begin with the next slide. So I will just present the slide of ASERT and the Resource and Environment, Disaster and Energy Economic Research Laboratory. So yes, a research laboratory encourages production of research output and supports the learning process of both the faculty and students. And the Department of Economics has to this end established 4 research laboratories: international economics, human resource economics, finance and macro policy economics, and READY, the Resource and Environment, Disaster and Energy Economics Laboratory. Next slide, please. So yes, as Dr. Emma pointed out, the READY laboratory is closely working with CCARP and its researchers and members. And some of the research activities that the laboratory conducts and are currently undertaking is the assessment of the economic and social effects of the climate change and disasters in Marikina, Pasig, and Valenzuela cities in Metro Manila, and Naga and Iloilo cities since 2015. Then the training of academics, graduate students, and city planners in Naga and Iloilo on the use of computable general equilibrium methodology in assessing climate change and disasters from February to May 2021. Then we have an assessment of effects of climate change on social capital and economic vulnerability of fishing households in Laguna de Bay. Studies on local government risk management strategies to natural disasters in the Philippines, and study on impact of extreme rainfall days on the welfare of households in the formal and informal sectors. And finally, the competition with forward market for electricity, a laboratory experiment in aid of improving market design in the Philippines. So this very briefly summarizes the many activities and initiatives of ASERT. Let's go now to the next slide, please. This is Asia, the anthropological and sociological initiatives of the Ateneo, practically the research hub of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at the School of Social Sciences. It has currently 6 ongoing research programs, and because we are very short on time, I will feature 3 of them. Next, please. So this will be the Traces Laboratory, Climate and Disaster Resilient City Studies, and Spaces, Spatial and Socio-Materiality Studies. Next slide. So of course, you already all know and are very familiar, I suppose, with the Climate and Disaster Resilience Innovations Program of our very own Dr. Emma Porio. And the CDRI program interrogates the science policy practice nexus in climate, disasters, and resilience. Its components include gender, climate, and well-being, social geographies of power and marginality, community-based arts for resilience, transdisciplinary research internship program, coalitions for urban transformation, public-private partnerships for resilience, science communication projects. So that is together with DSA Asia at the RIT Innovation Center and the Community Resilience Laboratory. Next slide, please. So the next initiatives is the Spaces, Spatial and Social Materiality Studies of our very own Dean, Dr. Saloma Akpedonu. And spaces, and at the center of spaces is the everyday usage of space, technical representations and meanings that users attach to it. It aims to advance understandings of everyday practices as social material produced in interactions between people and the material world. Spaces also examines the social effects of the material world and vice versa, recognizing that materiality is created through social processes and that the social is also made up of material arrangements, spaces, objects, infrastructures, and technologies. And this entanglement is everywhere, from spaces in kindergartens to universities, from hyper-conditioned environments to public green spaces, from homes to spaces of work and leisure, to name a few. And current research projects investigate cooling consumption. Title is Keeping Cool During the Pandemic. And the other one would be green spaces and sustainable well-being, looking into the consumption of public parks. Thank you. And the next slide, please. So this is the Traces Asia Laboratory. It's a laboratory that's dedicated to the archaeology and archaeological research at the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. And we have currently 3 ongoing projects, although they are very much affected by the ongoing pandemic. They are somehow connected to very deep time events of disasters and climate changes. One example would be a project that we are conducting in our very own Loyola Heights campus, looking into formations of the so-called Guadalupe tuff. That's an exposed volcanic tuff area along the Marikina Rift Valley. They're about 700,000 to 1 million years old, and they stem from catastrophic eruptions of the Laguna de Bay volcanoes that at that time buried Metro Manila and its adjacent areas under massive deposits. So they are everywhere, Metro Manila area. And of course, nowadays they're very difficult to access. Most of Manila is covered by concrete and cement. But the Ateneo campus is one of the few remaining areas where we can study those formations and their contents. So those eruptions have probably destroyed most of the life back then in the metro area. And we expect to discover the fossils of a very much diverse fauna that is now completely extinct, and as well perhaps the remains of the first human occupants of the Philippines. Another site that chronicles changing environments and human responses, as well as early maritime interaction in prehistoric island Southeast Asia, is Bubok 1. That's a coastal site, a cave and rock shelter on a small island called Ilin in Mindoro. Its record includes a timeline of 35 to 40,000 years, and this encompasses several severe and rapid episodes of climate change, including the last glacial maximum, but also 2 glacial events in the Holocene, the 4.2 and the 8.2 event. Its material culture, its fauna, especially shell deposits, indicate a shift from deep-dwelling marine shells at the top to mangrove dwellers at the bottom layer. And this correlates directly with changes in sea level and environment. So next slide, please. Just to show the effects, these are the changing coastlines of Ilin Island that from 18,000 or 20,000 years ago until 4,000 years ago, which is pretty much similar to present day. And it shows how the island gradually got disconnected from the mainland, and the coastlines retreat towards the north, and so changed the human adaptation to the area, their subsistence patterns, and this went along with various technological inventions to react to those changing environments. And yeah, that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
This is great, Alfred. We can now connect it to, climate change and okay.
Yes,
thank you very much.
So we have a very nice historic record, prehistoric record of climate change.
It's one of the exciting development I can see. Okay, thank you very much. I'll now present briefly the coastal cities at risk, because I think I sent you ahead the link to our resilience toolkit, https://resilience-toolkit.philip.ph. If you can, that's practically all our achievements for the past 3 years. So I'll just go fast. So the coastal cities at risk in the Philippines is a consortium of the Ateneo de Manila, the Manila Observatory National Resilience Council, in partnership with the cities of Naga, Iloilo, Muntinlupa, and Metro Manila cities, as well as Ateneo de Naga University, University of the Philippines in Visayas, and the Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Muntinlupa. It's really a consortium of resilient cities. I will not go through that, because if you will Google our kit, everything is there. So our strategy really is to link vertical and horizontal intersectional analysis and strategies, so we can create what we call the nest of resilience, and we can institutionalize the resilience agenda through transfer action research, through our tools and technologies, through partnerships and networks and coalitions. So you can see here at the local level, the universities and resilience councils; at the national level, the National Resilience Council; the Office of Civil Defense, the National Disaster Risk Management Council, Department of Interior Local Governments, the Climate Change Commission, and the regional, we have the AAPTI, and then at the global, we partner with the UNDRR, UNFCCC, and JPDRR. I will not go through that, but basically we subscribe to these 3 principles of transfer action research, and we basically, you can look at here at our theory of change, so to speak, and our major partner for climate and climate projections and doing the climate disaster risk assessment with the local government units is the Manila Observatory and the National Resilience Council. You can see here the coaching and mentoring that really, I would say, we change the pattern of doing climate disaster risk assessment and planning at the local level through this process, through coaching and mentoring. Also recently, Manila Observatory just released the Philippine Climate Extreme Report 2020, which is a landmark publication. What we've learned in coastal cities at risk really is that risks are contextually driven, and risks are evolving over time, and we can document and study these processes through transfer resilience tools and innovations. And we can advance and deepen our knowledge on risk and resilience governance. And also we look at innovations. We emphasize 2 kinds of innovations: incremental adaptation and transformational adaptation. Incremental adaptation is really that you just make the systems more efficient, while transformational adaptation is really making the systems really work together and collaborate together to basically be able to do towards resilience thinking and acting. So for incremental adaptation, you have resilience innovation at the Ateneo Innovation Center that Nat was talking about earlier. But really one of the most exciting pathway is the art as a strategic pathway of resilience communication. I remembered in 2018 when I brought to the AAPTI our 5-year study of coastal cities at risk from 2011 to 2016, and the artists there just transformed in the 20 panels. And so they are more efficient in communicating risk really. Also, we also mobilize gender and resilience in the cities, making sure that resilience innovations are gendered. Also, we did community-based arts for resilience. You can see this all in the resilience toolkit. Okay? And so we've learned that to have evidence-based decision-making, leadership has to be committed to appreciate data systems, appreciate evidence in terms of the decision-making planning. We also discovered that private sector partnerships is really a key dynamic partnership in terms of resilience building, and also innovations, tools, and methods are really necessary for to support decision-making at the local, national level, and that learning, mentoring are really important in making, decision makers champion resilience. Also, what are the challenges really that we found is that really, to enable mechanisms for resilience, you have to think about the intersectionality and transdisciplinarity that has to be embedded in all these systems. Also, the challenge really of vertical coherence between national and local policies, and that to sustain resilience investments, we require really institutionalization of all of this, and that it requires public-private partnerships. This is the whole team. You can see that, and this is our output. So if we click on the link here, it will go to our resilience toolkit. I will not do that because I sent that to you already. But you can see here all our outputs for the past 3 years. And so our plans for next 3-4 years, so to speak, we will update and refine our resilience toolkit, and we will have wider partnerships throughout the Philippines and the Asian region. And then we also have our enhanced social vulnerability analysis with Manila, the city of Manila, in partnership with the DSA Asia, Manila Observatory, National Resilience Council, DOST FIBOX, Rizal University, and other universities in Manila. And then we also support, right now, Dr. Tangonan of the AIC is working with the George Mason University on agent-based modeling for evacuation in densely populated cities like Manila. Then we have the ecosystems-based adaptation for coastal ecosystems with UPV, with 3 other universities, really, which I will use this. I've been recently part of the Climate Change Commission National Panel of Technical Experts. We will use this as a base for policy dialogues on making, nature-based solutions for coastal ecosystems adaptation. Then we have the Urban Climate Change Research Network, third assessment with the Earth Institute Colombia, which is focused on equity and formality. And then we have with the Ateneo Innovation Center, the scientific capacity building with Pasig City, Naga City, Valenzuela, and other places. And then last but not the least, we have the engendering, this is the ADRR Data Ecosystem, the government, together with the university's University Gender and Development Office with Dr. Melissa Lau. So I want always, this is my favorite slide now this year. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go too far, go together. This is a Refrain proverb. Thank you. Can we now move on to Dr. De Las Piñas on the, okay, Ninette, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So on behalf of the University Research Council, I'd like to thank Dr. Janki as well as the Tata University for this opportunity to do collaborative work in research. You've heard all of the researches that are currently being done at the School of Science and Engineering, at the Ateneo Research Institute of Science and Engineering, and then the School of Social Sciences. But if you'd like to know more about the research of the university, I'd like to invite you to explore the Archium Ateneo. As mentioned earlier by Dr. Espiritu, one of the research trusts of the university is integral ecology. We continue to have the goal of shaping sustainable communities and furthering studies on climate and disaster resilience. At the Archium, one can explore the various researches, not just the publications, but multimedia content from videos, and as well as the different researches of the departments. So one can, next slide please, take a look at the researches that we have aligned with UN SDGs. And for each department, one can take a look at not just the publications,
but also the research. Next slide, please. So here, like for example, our research on climate and disaster studies across various disciplines. You just simply have to visit the department site, and faculty publications as well as student theses for masters as well as for the PhD can be explored in each site. And if you also would like to look at the profiles of our researchers, I'd like to invite you to check out the various expert galleries of our faculty members. So you just enter their names or probably areas of interest, and you will be led to the profiles of each department and each researcher. So that wraps up my presentation. So thank you very much. And
Thank you, Nanette.
To collaboration with the Tata University.
Okay. Before I will go into the roundtable discussion, which I hope Dr. our Dean, our beloved Dean of the Social Sciences will, spearhead together with Professor Janki and I, is because I think Dean Rafael Guerrero is having another meeting, cannot attend. But before I go into that, congratulations, everyone. Congratulations, Professor Janki and the TISS team. Congratulations, Sose and Sos. We survived, no, on our marathon presentation. So may I now call, can we talk about, discussing BUPIP? Dr. Saloma, can you perhaps, lead, how do we proceed from here in terms of our exchanging ideas on how we can identify areas of potential collaboration?
All right. Yes, Emma. Okay. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me well.
Yeah, very well.
Okay. This is good. So we are hoping that after the presentations from both sides, where we showed our interest, our current work and plans for the next years or so, that we would be able to identify departure points for collaboration. These collaborations can be, as outlined can be field action, our engagements in the communities, can be on research, can be on mobility or capacity building in terms of researchers exchange, or even students and networking projects for the two institutions. So we hope that we could do that now. I'd like to begin that from the School of Social Sciences, we are thinking and doing social sciences in a particular way, in a way that it has three elements. One is belonging. We're really interested that those who are in the university would be able to do what they want to do. Those who study and work in the university would have successful navigation of university spaces. But I think the most important points about our ways of doing and thinking in the social sciences is that, second, we are actually promoting the problem-solving mode that highlights the role of scientists in offering not only analysis or critique, but practical results. And in that way, we are opening ourselves to the ways of the natural sciences. And third, we are also looking at translocal and transnational engagements as a way for us to better understand the Philippines. And this is probably where we can look at the partnership between our two institutions, especially in the area of global and area studies. So I'd like to start, give the floor back to you. Was there anything in the presentations?
Maybe we can ask Professor Janki. Yeah. BUPIP, maybe we can ask the TIS team headed by Professor Janki to also,
Yes. We open the floor for discussion, Emma. So it would be like, free for all. In fact, I don't even want to. Well, it's difficult to moderate now. I only see. Maybe we can close that. This is better. Can we have Joy? Can we have the tiles where everyone could see? We're only 28. That's probably not.
Yeah,
possible.
we're only 28. So.
But like we could see most, because now I see Emma. Is this correct? Are you seeing at least 25 tiles?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. Yes, then there's a gallery. So in fact, I would just say, feel free to talk, but I probably have to moderate. We'll have some rules. Again, just raise your hand. Is there something interesting? Well, okay, as Emma has said, let's first ask from the TIS, from Tata, Jamsetji Tata School for Disaster Studies.
Would anybody like to respond? Anything that caught your attention, caught your eye? Because I do see a lot of potential and scope for sort of convergence. But what we would really like to kind of focus on is maybe ideas that would have an impact. We would like to see outcomes. We definitely would like to see innovations and making sure that what we do can actually cascade at a larger level. So I think issues of policy and governance would also be important. But of course, they need to be grounded somewhere. The ideas need to sort of take root in maybe specific locales, specific geographies, and then we try and see how they can cascade. But I think, to my mind, that's also a sort of an approach that I see in a lot of work that you are doing. And specific areas of convergence, I would like to probably invite any members of who have not spoken, Malay or Irshad, anyone who's not presented as yet, whether they would like to identify maybe a couple of areas and that this is something that you would like to explore further. And I think once we have done that, it would be easier for us to have more bilateral sort of discussions, because I think it's a lot to take in at one shot, but this is a beginning. So would anybody like to respond? Because as was mentioned, this is more open and free for all sort of a brainstorming session where you saw certain kinds of resonance with what we are doing. Yeah, Irshad, you want to go? Yeah.
I really appreciate the team to put together the wonderful presentations and also sharing the ideas. So I would I mean think that the two areas which really attract my attention. One is the aerosol pollution, because one of my PhD students is working on the aerosol pollution in Mumbai city. He's looking at the risk governance in the context of how the governance establishment and the institutions are really, perceive the risk and how it is really actually practiced in their everyday governance. That is one of the topic I really want to know more from, because it really like my PhD student to get more about it. The second concern is the coastal resilience, because now is going to be a major environmental challenges in the southern state of India, that the coastal erosion, coastal disaster, coastal resilience. On top of that, the risk-induced displacement is one of the serious issues in this state of Kerala, where I'm personally coming from. We had a lot of interaction with the fishing communities on this issue, because recently we have completed a research project for the state of the regional government of Kerala to propose the various the mechanisms to help the fishing community to get back to build back their own resilience mechanism. But in our own research, we couldn't find a much more structural solution for that. We are also looking for a non-structural natural solution for community resilience, because the serious issue is displacement is going to be a major issue. These are the two areas I think that really attract my imagination. Also, I would like to know more about, because you talk about economic and social risk indexing. I've seen one of the slides. Maybe that part also, if I get an opportunity, I would like to explore further on this. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Irshad.
Does Malay want to say anything? Malay?
Yeah, it's really a great presentation from both the universities. Even all the things whenever we are talking about environment, technology, and also for humans, I think such kind of things like coastal resilience also very important. Yeah, So on that thing, we are definitely from TIS, we are trying to reaching through recent advancement, like different kind of platform, like location data streams, community-based data distribution, how such kind of thing we can innovate for coastal resilience based on different kind of climate adaptation. Definitely in Bangladesh, if we observe recent innovations also, like local people trying to cope themselves with their perception or their experience, whatever was in coastal areas, because they are means frequently facing such kind of issues. So in India also, we are thinking to innovate such kind of things. Maybe we have to analyze very micro scale. We are thinking to use some modern technology and also community-based data distribution, or maybe we are thinking some nature-based solution. I think such kind of things are also we can collaborate, where both universities are very aligned on that. So I think we are opening other colleagues, then we'll be come together then.
Pihu, you want to say something?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just speak briefly. Since I work in health, and I see that just a second, give me a minute. What I wanted to say was that looking at the climate, which is very common over here, if as a South-South collaboration, if we can look at some of the community initiatives in Philippines as well as in India, which can be replicable models, because the climate is quite similar and the disasters that are faced are quite similar. So, if that would be a very nice thing, because the context would be quite similar, and we can have a socio-technical approach towards that. So that was my suggestion.
All right. I think Dr. Pihu, it's actually a good idea, a South-South collaboration, because usually it's North-South. And a South-South collaboration would actually bring in new perspectives to our work here. I think we've already mentioned 2 or 3 policy. Aerosol pollution, coastal resilience, and even the economic aspect of CCA and DRR. Can we hear from from the Ateneo, OB and Randy, what you think of the initial interest that has been expressed from our colleagues?
OB, I think James is here, no? Because for air pollution, you can talk about our partnership with Tropos and Germany, right? OB, and James is here.
Yes, so maybe
yeah,
me for now, and
yeah,
then
okay.
James can sure, we can explore possible collaborations with our partners in Tata. Certainly, as Ma'am Emma would always say, it's air pollution is a hidden disaster, and it depends on our chronic and also our acute exposure to it. And as you've seen in the slides earlier, early mornings in Metro Manila, I'm sure it might be like that for you as well in your area. And so it's something that we have to contend with on a daily basis. So yes, certainly we can explore possible areas for collaboration in this rather complex but not complicated, as Ma'am Emma would say, area of research. Thanks.
All right. Randy, would you have a response now?
Well, initially, yes. This is a very welcome. That's a very welcome suggestion to have a collaboration in terms of the economic assessments of climate change. No? We have a particular methodology that we have been using, and we'd like to share this methodology also with you. Maybe we can start with some sort of exchange of papers. No? But yes, and I want to know also more details about how you've done also your economic studies. No? So I guess sort of an exchange in specific areas would be very useful, Prof. Emma and Dean Bo-Peep, no? And also our colleagues at Tata for this.
Thank you. We have here on the chat.
Can I very quickly,
all right, sure.
Yeah, just a quick thought. To kind of, while research collaboration is one aspect, and I think, yes, we would need to have a little more discussion, identify specific groupings and have greater interaction. Another possibility which we haven't really discussed is exchange of students, because that may be also another interesting way for us to engage in each other's countries and make sure that, we sort of, our students get an exposure to what's going on in another country. And that may be, of course, we'll have to look at the possibility, but that may be a useful aspect that we should also simultaneously explore. Yeah.
All right. That's noted. We have models already at work here in Ateneo for student exchange with other universities, with partner universities. We'll go back to that. I think in moving forward, we'll have to look at how we want this form take shape, what form this collaboration will take. But let me just look at a question about areas of research first, areas of collaboration, not just even research, but maybe of general forms of knowledge exchange. And we have a question here from Greg. Greg, would you like to raise that yourself?
Okay. I'm Greg Tangona from the Ateneo Innovation Center, and I would like to propose the joint research project, which we are starting now. It's on extreme heat in urban environments, especially in informal communities. We are beginning to map the internal temperatures of different dwellings. And now we would like to, and we see some high heat enhancements, especially in the informal communities. I'm very interested in understanding the coping strategies of people in extreme heat. And we know very well in India, you have very, very good examples of extreme heat. That might in fact be a very important area for us to have project. But our advantage here in Ateneo, we have the socio-anthropology teams that can go into communities and investigate how people are coping with this extreme heat. It will only get worse, and better we start a project jointly. And we've already begun within AIC, but I think we can expand it in Ateneo, and maybe together with Tata, we can do a similar experiment and long-term study. It's only going to get worse.
That's a good comparative. That's a good comparative study, because I remember when I was presiding the panel on urban heat and adaptation features, the presenter from India said that 3,000 people died in the urban heat that year before, and it made the German and European presenters conscious, because we're only concerned thermal comfort, while in the south people are dying heat. Yeah.
All right,
thank you.
Emma, Niti, what was that? You were raising your hand earlier.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you for all the presentations. I thought since everyone was putting across their points, I've put my points in the chat box, where I really appreciated the work done on the operationalization of urban resilience indicators, and would like to know more about the work on everyday use of space and climate change and well-being that is done by universities, because these are probable areas of research which are of interest to me. And other than that, since you were talking about collaborative or comparative research, even the community-based resilience, how you understand community-based resilience in in the two countries, because both countries have good work done on community-based initiatives. So comparing and looking at best practices or lesson learned from these two countries would be a good idea to take forward.
Niti, are you in particular referring to extreme heat?
No, I'm not referring to extreme heats, but
okay.
I was talking in terms of on cyclones, where we see a lot of cyclones on eastern coast, and even Philippines is quite frequently affected by cyclones. So a lot of work is done on community-based initiatives on cyclones, post-disaster housing recovery initiatives. So I have referred to a lot of case studies from Philippines. So I was thinking if we could have more of collaborative work where we see the type of work done in both the countries. I think that would also be something where we could take things forward.
All right. So we're actually we are now doing extreme weather or extreme heat. We are expressing interest in the work on extreme heat. Yeah. Is there something else, or would you already want to focus now on extreme heat and looking at the various dimensions on that? Is it too fast identifying, narrowing? But I'm really looking at the time, but we have something. It's a good sign. We have something being well. There's a common interest on the topic. Emma?
Yeah, I think it's a good, extreme heat is really within the focus of extreme events. What we have to face for the next, 10 years or so and more is really on extreme events. As I always said to the local government units, it's either there's too much water, we have flooding, or we have too little and we have drought. So heat will fall into that. And I think it's a good, I think Greg who has expressed that we can take that, and I put there in the chat that we can form a Google group for this to really focus on potential collaboration. But also I was also putting there in the Google chat that maybe we can plan on a joint conference later 2022 in terms of based on our collaboration. We basically put the, shall we say, the outcomes out there. I mean, Professor Janki was talking about impacts. As far as the CCAR-PH in the Philippines is concerned, we're really making our impact really by changing the dynamics of planning in the local government, because that's where the action is. We also have the Mandanas ruling, and which really will put action at the local level. Investments in climate disaster risk reduction and resilience will be there. So I think that's why, if you notice in my presentation, I focus on bridging science policy practice nexus. So I think heat will be extreme heat will be a good one to start with. If Greg will like to take the lead on that, because he's now doing it with the GMU. Greg is our mascot for the Ateneo GMU National Resilience Exchange. Okay, Greg.
Just for context, all right, before Greg answers that question, just for context, Emma, can you briefly say what is Mandana's ruling? And
yeah, there are two major policies released the last 3 years. One is President Duterte mandating all local governments to do the community-based management information system, so that all villages, all communities will have the data. Because what we have, people are so big in saying evidence-based informed decision making, but they really, we don't know where they get the evidence, and like that. So that's the community-based monitoring information system, which basically we are arguing now with the OCD and the ILG and the Climate Change Commission that we have to have that. So that's one. The second is the Mandana's ruling, which basically it's the second devolution. Remember, we had the 1990 decentralization. Now this is real in the sense that it will really put all the work on climate and disaster risk reduction and everything at the local government level. And they need support from science and technology. in terms of tools, in terms of databases and the like. So, so for example, for heat, I have not seen a very good, I mean, I've worked with several local government units. They don't have very good data on the heat indices of the city over time. So yes, the Mandanas ruling will really need for us scientists to be there to be of the handmaiden of science and technology for, resilient, what I call risk-informed resilience planning and development. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Emma. And GMU, if I'm not mistaken, is George Mason University.
Yes. Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, Jacqueline, hold on. Let me just ask Dr. Greg Tangonan to answer Emma's question about taking the lead here.
Well, I'm over here in California.
I'm quick on assigning people to do the work.
But the guys in AIC we will be continuing the experiments we have started and mapping. But more importantly, we, as Emma was describing when we first envisaged the project, we wanted to look into the living conditions within their homes and have social economic interviews, because as the heat goes up, then a number of diseases, especially for the elderly, become much more acute. And I think we really have to look at that, especially in the context that most informal communities don't have running water. They don't have good ventilation in there, and they're cooking indoors. And so there's a lot of particulates. So it's almost as if we have to begin to understand the urban microclimate and not the club scale or even the citywide scale. We have to get down to where people actually live, and they're suffering under that heat. So that's the kind of theme we're doing right now, and maybe it's good time that we collaborate on that. We'd certainly be willing in AIC to be in the charge, but the full university spectrum of investigators, including the socioeconomic side. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Right, that has been clarified for the Ateneo side. Okay, Jacqueline.
Thank you. Just wanted to identify 2 points of convergence. One was the problem-focused, which both universities kind of have a problem-focused approach, or a pedagogy that kind of believes in problem-focused work. So that's something that I think we need to have a basis to build on. The second one is with regard to area of interest on transitional and transformative resilience, kind of in whichever area that we're looking at, because in the Indian context also resilience is picking up within the policy circles, and it is not, in a sense, many of the public sector actors are still warming up to this. And we've kind of done a study where we looked at public sector actors' perceptions of resilience and how it is picking up. And we've kind of mapped the nature of resilience initiative in the water sector, in disaster risk reduction related area. Similarly for heat, similarly for water or coastal hazards. Across the two countries, we could kind of look at what kind of resilience initiative, what is labeled as resilience initiatives, what could be labeled or what is going to be labeled as resilience initiatives, from the whole lens of transitional interventions to that of transformative interventions, which kind of then center social and environmental justice as the center point, because that kind of becomes the core focus when we're kind of looking at Global South, when we're looking at interventions, resilience interventions in the Global South. So that's one point of convergence the 2 points of convergence that I could kind of see. And
all right, thank you, Jacqueline.
We have more or less enough, no? Unless there are other suggestions. I think you have a lot of to chew on already, Bupip, no?
I want to ask Ravinder, do you have any thoughts or suggestions specific to the Center for Geoinformatics? Because I think we heard interesting sort of work that's going on there as well. So anything that you would like to flag?
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Yeah, definitely. good quality work is going on, and definitely it is a large team also. So some of the ideas I would like to say, this urban heat assessment in informal settlements, I also personally feel a very interesting topic and a lot of scope because the informal settlements in Indian urban cities also facing such challenges, and how we can develop various methods of assessment and other scenarios that personally I feel very interesting idea. Other than that, about the coastal resilience toolkit. So considering the Indian coastline also the already which is already in place, so does it make sense the if we how we can test and validate the existing resilience toolkit? Is it useful for Indian case scenario also? It means if there is a scope of validation, then we can save a lot of money from the projects and so on, and it is like a cross-country application of existing approaches. So that area I can find out, you can see where scope is there. Other than that, whatever methods we are developing, considering the local challenges, are these methods or solutions applicable to the other locations in Philippines and so on? And same way, the developed methods, what they have developed on local case studies, can we replicate these methods? Not the exact replication, but what kind of modifications are needed so that we can utilize the knowledge or transfer of the knowledge, plus a joint course development also I can see at the master's level in disaster management course, which specifically talk about practice-oriented decision science at the operational level and the policy level and at the community level. So what we can provide a combined course from the faculties from ADMU and the faculties of JTSDS, if that can be a possibility. So these are some of the ideas, and we can take further. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Ravinder. Okay, what we have now here, the chat has also been very busy here. We are going to we have identified a research collaboration as a possible way to move forward, and we have identified a topic, or urban heat, but we can even expand that to include extreme weather, and we will now have an extreme events study or research collaboration, for example. There's also this area, so this is the topic, but there is also an interest in the form that it will take. So it's not just research, but also student and researcher mobility. Okay, so that's one area that has been identified. Jacqueline, of course, was talking about involving the public sector. So the scale of our engagements, we have already identified transdisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, and of course that would include the extra academic audiences as well as our public sector, but also on the ground. I think that's very important that we are able to work on the ground. Dr. Toby Dairy mentioned that also, and finding out the solutions from the communities. Kendra talked about, it is actually, Kendra, a topic for moving forward, which I will be happy to explore. Now, how do we finance? We need some funds. We need, how do we interest other actors and partners to join us? So it's 4:10 exactly, Emma, and this is actually, we are on time, on the dot, to move from the brainstorming portion to moving forward. So I now turn the table to you and Dr. Janki for
you're
this
still
most
part.
important portion.
If you look at the link that I did, the ways forward will involve the two deans, but Dean Paeng, you know, it was called something. The two deans and us. So continue, please.
That's all right. Now, so we now identified. So Emma,
yeah,
how
we've
would you
identified.
like to move forward now? We have a research topic. Greg has kindly accepted from the point from the Ateneo de Manila University. It will be the Ateneo Innovation Center with Dr. Greg Tanguanan, who would be the point person, but that would also involve the other institutes which are represented here in this meeting, from the
Yes.
School of Science and Engineering and the School of Social Sciences. But it's very important that we have a point person.
So that's Greg.
That can and a host institution, and then from our end we will just identify how the work will be delivered from our end. Now, Professor Janki, who do you think would be the point person from your end in terms of the extreme?
I think my proposition is as follows. What we should do is perhaps develop a concept note, and if Greg could do that, and that concept note is then sort of shared with everybody, and that's typically how we do our collaborative research work, that one party or somebody takes the initiative and develops a brief concept note, and then that's discussed, in a team, and then you enrich it, you add dimensions and nuances or whatever, and then sort of create a proposal which is acceptable to everybody. And since Ravinder is going to be one of the persons who's also going to be like a key person who is going to be associated with this collaboration, and he has also indicated that that's something that is of interest to him, probably he could be the person, and he will coordinate amongst all of us here to develop that proposal further. My other suggestion also is that we could look at other ideas, because all the ideas may not come up right away. I mean, for example, looking at indigenous knowledge, and indigenous systems of coping, of responding, it's something that might be of interest to your country, and you have a strong team of anthropologists. So that's something that we could do, which can be tested, validated by your scientific team. I mean, there are things that we could do. There is also an interest in that amongst some of our colleagues. So when we talk of science-society policy interface, there could be several ideas and several suggestions. And we might like to share some of those ideas, maybe in a Google group, like MI is suggesting. We create a Google group and identify themes which we, for instance, if just our team sitting together, we might be able to identify in a little more sort of involved manner different ideas, and we can bounce those off you, having heard what your interests are. So that's, I mean, I think we should close in on all the possibilities right away, because we do have we do need a little more time to internalize and absorb everything that we have heard. I think I'm speaking for all of us.
May I suggest, Professor Janki, your ideas are very good, but I think since urban heat is really what it seems to be real, and I may say that the heat study was presented actually by Dr. Greg Tangonan in our MOU with the city of Pasig, and actually the AIC owes. Anyway, so what we're saying, Professor Janki, is that the heat study of Professor Greg Tangonan has been long there. She presented it to Mayor Vico in 2019, and AIC has been gathering data several times, also on our end. We've been doing so, but what I'm thinking of is that perhaps, Professor Janki, we have identified really urban heat, wherein we have people, because our collaboration of this is good. As if Greg Tangonan takes the lead here for Ateneo, and you have Ravinder, who will take care of TISS. So that's it. We identify it as one area, and of course, your suggestion about indigenous knowledge is really very, very apt, because now we're talking about, we always say, global problems always have local responses, and that's why we are focusing with the LGUs and things like that. So, but maybe what I was thinking, in the interest of time, we started the urban heat, unless there's really what we call a traction in another major area, then we leave that to a Google group. I'll ask Joy if she can put a Google group, and we can continue discussing this next year. because we are now in our last part of the semester and we are all getting crazy with all our grading, things like that. So, but as I said, you know, if as you said earlier, you know, we're bombarded with many things, and then, you know, we, you know, in terms of trying to agree, okay, we can work on this. So maybe we can just start. Bupip, what do you think? Din Bupip, we start with the heat, and we'll form a Google group, and then can, you know, everybody can say, you know, whatever is there, and then also perhaps, you know, because I counted several. I mean, Bupip counted several areas that was of interest. You know, coastal resilience. So there's and then the aerosol thing. So we will just until, you know, maybe by January there will be some more traction on some of the things, because right now we have 10 minutes to go. What do you think, Bupip?
What I would suggest would be smaller meetings now. We have to move from the big meetings. We now have a smaller meeting from our end, Professor Janki and colleagues in TIS. We already have the Ateneo Innovation Center, AIC, and Dr. Greg Tangonan as the point person. I think it's really important that you now have assigned Dr. Ravinder Dhiman to be the contact person from your end. And the way I work in the SOS actually is that I have sort of adopted the Google way of multiple groups coming up with concept notes, and the better idea wins in the end. So everyone actually in my team comes up with a concept note. We meet together, and then we'll come up with a common concept note in the end. So I think that might be the way to go from this end, rather than expect the AIC to come up with the concept note first and then response from, I mean, it's too rigid. I think the smaller meetings would be everyone comes with a concept note, and then all the big ideas will survive, and the others will have to wait. The other ideas will have to wait for some time. That would be my suggestion from my end.
Is that okay with you, Professor Janki?
I think when we say that smaller ideas, larger ideas, ideas are ideas, I am someone who feels that it's good to ideate together. And sometimes in the small idea, you might have a big idea hidden somewhere with a big impact. So I think and I agree with you that working in smaller groups might be more feasible, and otherwise it can get quite unwieldy. And therefore the suggestion that, you know, if we can concretize some thoughts, crystallize our thoughts, for example, what Malay said, it needs to be put down in a concrete sort of a one-page note in order to get a sense of direction. So
we do the Google way of Dr. Saloma.
Yeah, and within that, we can say that, okay, this is the team that is working on it, and they'll come back to us within a week or 10 days or 20 days, whatever time they need. And then we come back and ideate together. I think that should be fine. And we really, I just want to comment before we close on the question of funding. I've had a discussion with the ambassador, and he has said that we could work on proposals, and I think the ministry is likely to consider it. So there is potential for us to put a funding requirement across. Of course, if there are ongoing projects, the funding is already there. We can say that, okay, something is taken care of by existing programs or projects, but we would still need. So for instance, if we are to do student exchanges, certainly we will need funding. And I think that's something that we should also not let go of from the table. And the other thing that Soumya presented is that we are already running a program on, it's an online program on on disaster management, which is with the International Federation of Red Cross. If there are people interested, if anyone in the community is interested, if you can put us in touch with the Philippines Red Cross, the National Society, we could be interacting with them through you. And, you know, that could be another sort of, it doesn't have to be just what we are doing, but we could have several possibilities.
That's good. I think BOPIP, aside from the urban heat, the other thing is student exchange. I think that's more promising, really, in terms of, you know, exchange of ideas, and also really, and I would be interested on graduate students, master students who are doing their thesis and who will be interested, let's say, in urban heat or community-based resilience, things like that. BOPIP, I mean, I think we have, I think if we can talk to it's really the Office of the International Relations or be in charge of that, no?
Yes, that's correct, Emma.
So let's just do for now, let's just focus on the urban heat and the student exchange. And then perhaps we can, meanwhile, we can do our exchange between now and maybe we can have another meeting, or depending on what comes out in the exchange or in the Google exchange. Maybe we can have a meeting as the earliest, maybe February. Professor Janki?
Yeah.
That's
okay.
fine.
There's
all
also,
right.
I mean, I'm also aware of a Jesuit body in India where I'm told that there's a network of Jesuit institutions and universities in the region that are also interfacing and interacting on several of the common concerns. So probably we could, I mean, I could be talking to them to just find out what are their sort of ongoing interests, and if there is potential for bilateral funding within their agenda, our agenda. So I think we could look at possible areas of convergence.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
Emma, before we part, can we identify a date in when exactly in February so we could mark that for everyone?
Last week of February. I'll look at, you know, the other things, and then I'll email through the Google group that Joy and I will. Okay.
All right. So the week of 21 to 24 February.
28 then. On Monday.
All right.
Okay.
Monday, so now I turn over the table, whatever space this is,
done already.
Emma and Professor Janki.
No, just a vote of thanks to everybody. Has been wonderful listening to the great work that you guys are doing. So great, and thank you to everyone who's made the time from Ateneo and all your colleagues. Really wonderful. And like I keep saying, it would have been great if we could have met in person, and we will work towards that kind of a meeting in person. Soumya, you will take a photo?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so just hold your smile since the screens would be jumbled up a bit. And can I also request everyone to turn on their videos? Okay, so 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, that's picture 1. That one. And next panel, 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Professor Janki. Thank you, Dean, and all the presenters from TISS. It's wonderful. And also from the ADMO Manila Observatory side. Thank you very much. And have a great holiday, despite all your work. Okay. So thank you very much. It's a great exchange. Thank you, Professor Janki, for mobilizing it from your end. And also Joy, thank you. And all my colleagues here in Ateneo de Manila. Thank you very much. It's really great.
Merry Christmas to all of you, and also a very Happy New Year in advance.
Merry Christmas.